Again, you bring up so many points, Abs, that are critical here. One is, the technology is evolving, and again, it displaces the existing technology. We use 75, 80-year-old technology, Swift and Fedwire and ACH, to move trillions and trillions of dollars around the world. And one of the things that gets lost on most people, because they just never stop to really think about it, when we talk about the market, right? People talk stocks. They think the S&P or the Dow. Well, the stock market is certainly big, again, tens of trillions of dollars, but it pales in comparison to the bond market. Bond market's orders of magnitude bigger. And those both pale in comparison to the currency market, which is orders of magnitude bigger than that, which then pale in comparison to the derivatives market, which are orders of magnitude bigger than that. So all of this is interrelated in the old system, right? The base layer, gold. Everything sits on top of that. Fedwire sits on top of that. Because they, JP Morgan, all those ones that you just showed, and all the other global banks, skim 7 trillion with a T a year in fees for doing all of this stuff so that we can take our money, give it to them, so it becomes their money, right? That's the fallacy of banking, right? You give the money to the bank, it's now theirs. Look on their balance sheet, it's on their balance sheet. And you have an IOU, but there are problems with IOUs sometimes. Long story short, these banks like that $7 trillion of fees. Blockchain, broadly speaking, crypto, does away with the need for that. Like right now, let's say I had a mother-in-law in El Salvador. Now, my mother-in-law is in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but let's say she lived in El Salvador and I wanted to send her money, right? A remittance. I would go to Western Union, I'd send the money, and she would get 70 pesos on the dollar because there's massive friction between the banks and Western Union and BIS and massive to attack us and take our stuff. So we're like, why don't we leave the money in the bank and electronify it, make it into ones and zeros? And so we created all this software, again, based on COBOL and Fortran and all these dead languages. And it's worked really well for, coming up on 100 years. I think banking systems worked really well for about 800 years. But blockchain does something very unique. It moves us into the digital age. Well, what's the digital age? Well, digital is better than electronic because it takes trust. Like the whole financial institution system globally is based on trust. Right? Think about it. I have a nightmare, and it doesn't happen all the time, but a couple times a year I have a nightmare where I go to the ATM and I punch in my code and the screen says 0. Like, how would I prove it's not 0? I don't have a statement. I don't have an analog statement. Got rid of those years ago. It's their word against mine. It's that trust. And look, 99.9% of the time that trust is fine. But if you wake up one morning like 13 years ago in Cyprus, you go to the bank and they say, oh yeah, Scott Stornetta, who's famous, he's in the back of the white paper 3 times in the footnotes. He invented the term blockchain. He was a computer scientist at Stanford. And he said, the problem with trust is you need a judge, right? So for Mark and Abs to trust each other with their 2 ledgers, they need this judge, the Medicis. Well, the judge is corruptible, so you need someone to watch the judge. Well, then that person's corruptible, so you need someone to watch the watcher. And then you need everybody. Wait, that's a blockchain. That's a chain of people watching. Well, when the actual blockchain, when digital, what Satoshi gave us, and Satoshi was the first, and then there were others that followed, but what Satoshi gave us is digital uniqueness that you can't copy paste. Simple example, Napster. Again, I'm old, so Napster was the thing. And if I wanted to share my music with you, I could copy paste a copy of a song and send it to you. I could share it using Napster. Well, I liked it, you liked it, but the music industry hated it. It is absolutely the future. And look, I have an interesting kind of love-hate relationship with the community. I know some people, because I've said some things that I didn't mean them as strongly maybe as they came out. I don't really think Brad is a bad person. I never said that. I don't like the way XRP was created, right? I don't like that it all went in the foundation and then they feed it out to retail. I don't like that. I like proof of work. I'm on record. So anyway, but that said, everything he talks about in terms of the technology and the goal, I'm in violent agreement with. And so I would like to see more development activity, more developer activity in XRP. I see the foundation doing a lot. I see him talking a lot. I see him announcing a lot of, trials and things, but I don't see, like I say this all the time. I'm a venture capitalist for the last 8 years in the digital space. We've done
maybe aren't totally mainstream, but you look at their leadership teams and we really believe in them, right?
Look, again, Abs, you bring up so many good points with that example, in that one of the things that you can do. So I'll give you two examples. So there's the Block One guys, right? They did a big ICO and they raised a bunch of money and they started a protocol and it went up, and then they took all the money and they bought Bitcoin, and the protocol died and it's gone, and they're super rich and super happy and doing all kinds of fun stuff. No, that's not what was supposed to happen. You were supposed to develop the protocol with all that money that people gave you. That's, in my mind, the wrong way to do it. Now, I said I don't love the fact that all the money went into the Ripple or the XRP Foundation. However, why they might be better. So all that said, I do think we're all fighting, right? This is interesting. All these communities, right? Sometimes they think of them as warring factions. No, we're all kind of common and united against the same enemy. And the enemy is the entrenched masses. Like, I don't know if we've talked about this in the past, but there's a cool show. I can't remember, I think it was Apple TV maybe, called Mr. Robot. And it came out in 2016, 15, 16. I would say if I had watched it in real time, I'd be much wealthier today, but I didn't watch it in real time. And the reason I say it is because it was a perfect story with a lot of gratuitous violence and sex and drugs. But so I didn't love all of it, but I love the actor. Remy was amazing. But the story of Evil Corp, which is clearly JP Morgan, and the technological kind of attack on that, which is Bitcoin and other chains, is real. And so the more likely path, particularly for people who aren't tech savvy. Like I talk about this all the time. My dad has a Coinbase account and owns Bitcoin. All the maxis are like, he doesn't own Bitcoin, not his keys, not his coins. Like, you tell my dad he doesn't own Bitcoin. He thinks he owns Bitcoin. Price goes up in his account like Bitcoin. So for him, well, Coinbase is just like a bank. It's a single point of failure. Sure. And they had, they had a data leak because, some bad guys paid some of their employees to give personal data. So yeah, of course. But that's an interim step. It's not the end game. And so I applaud everyone, including XRP and Ripple, for trying to push this digital future. And it's going to come down to the best tech. And again, we've talked about this before, it means the person with the biggest bag can make rules. And that's less good. To me, again, it doesn't mean that I'm right. It's just how I think about it. And so I have some things that are digital that are valuable. And I do tend to put them on the Bitcoin blockchain, but that's just because I like proof of work. Now, someone can convince me that proof of stake or proof of authority or proof of time or all these other, consensus mechanisms. Anyway, so that's a long-winded answer to your question.
Yeah, it's a great response, guys. We got 6,000 live listeners here. We're 30 minutes in. If you're enjoying today's content, be sure to smash that like button during today's episode. Now, Mark, one final thing is I think a lot of people in our community specifically are middle-class Americans, just like ourselves. Well, not ourselves, but myself, right? And one of the things I know about being a middle-class American is that it's sometimes they have a common saying, right? It's easier to be either completely broke or wealthy, but being in the middle class is this middle ground where things are very difficult, right? You have just enough where you don't want to lose it, but you don't have enough that you're living totally comfortable yet, right? And I think a lot of people in our community are, I would
say it's 10 to 15% of, your total that funds your lifestyle. And it's got a hole in the bottom of the bucket, right? So it drips out every day, every week, every month. And then at the tippy top, you've got another bucket. That's your get rich bucket. Okay. And that's where you're doing, I would say friend's condo deal, the brother-in-law's venture deal, and you're going to lose all that. So keep it small. No, I'm just kidding around. No, that's where you take your big risk. And that's where, whether it's an altcoin project or whether it's a venture capital project, think about this: pre-seed stage venture, right? Just idea and a napkin has about a 95-ish% failure rate. But those 5% that make it, you can make 100x, 1,000x. I mean, you can make huge returns. If you get to seed stage venture, okay, the failure rate drops, but the upside is a little bit more truncated. And then you get to later stage venture, you might make 2 or 3 times your money and maybe a 50-50. It's a store of value. It's proof of work, right? Just like gold, you got to mine it in the ground. So that can be a meaningful portion of your assets. But if you want to grow faster, then you got to look at things that are taking more risk, that are doing novel things. But now we get into tokenomics. If you invest in a project where the cash flows generated by that project are shared with the tokens, awesome, right? That's like owning a company. If you're in a token and the only way for it to go up is for someone else to buy it, it's a meme coin. So Doge comes to mind, or Shiba Inu. And you're like, but those are value. Like, no, they don't. I mean, they have value because Elon bought some Doge and tweeted about it and everybody else bought it and it went up. Great. But the problem is, if Cuban or Elon ever sold their wallet, the thing evaporates. It just evaporates. And so meme coins, they can work in a short term, but long term, what is there? Not a lot. Now, if you look at in between projects where you don't know the future, they're going to be volatile. Like, okay, they want to prove they're right, so they buy more. Losers, average losers. Most times the market's right and you're wrong. Not every time, but most times. So Julian Robertson, who is a mentor of mine, famous hedge fund manager, and I talked to all these people that work for Julian, and they're all super successful. In fact, the people that worked for Julian managed 10% of all the long short money in the world. It's pretty amazing. And I asked him all this. I asked him, what made Julian so great? I'm like, so many things. He's a man of integrity. He had, courage of his convictions, because courage is really, really important in investing. Great ideas are plentiful. Courage is rare. But what really made him the best was they said he had an uncanny ability to double up. So you spread your bets out. The things that start to go against you, you just sell them and move on. But the things that start to work, you actually buy more. And you say, Mark, that's counterintuitive. You total control. Now people say, oh, MetaMask, that's so bad. And fine, then show me what's better. And we'll keep improving on the UI UX. We'll keep improving on the security. We'll keep improving on the framework. But at the end of the day, are we going to use smart contracts to transfer value? Absolutely. I joke all the time. I like to make bets. And so we'll make a bet on a football game, basketball game, I'm a Notre Dame guy. And, for a long time I was losing a lot of bets, but I would forget I even made them. And people say, you still owe me. Like, fine, come to Chapel Hill, I'll buy you the dinner. Yeah, great. But if I had a smart contract, it's not up to me to forget. It would just get paid. It would just get executed. And so that's the type of stuff where you think about any contract. Think about contract disputes. Think about how much money we spend on lawyers for contract disputes. If it's a smart contract and it executes based on completion of work, boom, no lawyers necessary. This is a huge wealth creation opportunity. And we do say it all the time. Web 1 created 2 trillion. Web 2 created 5 trillion. We do think Web 3 will create, 20-ish trillion because it's an exponential growth curve. So yeah, don't F this up. But to your point, definitely pick projects. Don't pick meme coins. Don't pick. If you want to gamble and speculate, knock yourself out. Like, I'm going to Vegas next week for BTC. I'm probably not going to gamble. A lot of people will. I like it sometimes, but most of it I don't really care about. But if that's what your thing is, great. My brother does it all the time. My brother bets on everything. And that's not bad or good. We're going to go play golf here in a little bit, and I'm probably going to have to bet him on our golf game, and I'm going to lose because he's a good golfer and I'm not. But
like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Support the channel by liking this video, subscribing, and enabling post notifications for more content on crypto and digital assets. Check out our other videos and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps with the YouTube algorithm and keeps the content coming. Thanks for your support. Enjoy the video.